Hi, it's Tony Chapman. I'm the host of the podcast Chatter That Matters. 2008, something very special happened to me. I was inducted into the Canada's Marketing Hall of Legends. It's one of the proudest moments of my career because my family was there, one of the proudest moments of my life. You see, in this hall are people that have put a dent in the marketplace. We have visionaries who came up with ideas. We have business builders that not only established their brand in Canada, but around the world. We have stewards of brands who found a way to engage the head and heart and hands of the consumer and the media. We have leaders and creators that built campaigns that dance all over media. This is more than the Hall of Legends. When you think about it, it's the Hall of Learning. Imagine the intellectual resource that exists within it. The lessons in life, the journey, the overcoming circumstances, the tightropes, the way they reinvented and reimagined the world. The American Marketing Association's Toronto chapter came up with this idea of curating this learning. And what they've done is they've created the Legends Journey, Lessons in Leadership. We're gonna take some of the people that are in this hall, spend some time interviewing them, draw out what they bring not only to your livelihood, but ideally to your life. So thank you for being part of Lessons in Leadership and the Legends Journey.
Joining me now is Angus Reid. Have you ever heard the expression, math is the language of the universe? Well, this is one of the most fluent people on the planet. He's been studying numbers. He's been understanding how we think, feel, and behave forever. He's a pollster. He's a best-selling author. He's an entrepreneur extraordinaire. He's inducted in the Marketing Hall of Legends in 2010. Angus, welcome to this Legends in Leadership series.
It's great to join you, Tony.
Angus, where did your fascination with numbers begin?
Some people are born with musical aptitude, or they're good artists, or they're good at sports. I was good at none of those, but I always had a fascination with numbers.
So how did you connect the two? Because to me, math is very logical. Intuition is very much from the heart, and you've managed to put both of those together. So tell us how that all came about.
I'm trained as a sociologist. That's what I have my doctorate in. And my passion was to really try to understand what's happening in society, where we come from, and more importantly, where are we going? Life is about a lot more than just economics. Life is about families and communities. It's about how we feel about people, events, products in the marketplace, and other things of that sort. Those are feelings, but really the art of polling and the science of polling is all about trying to measure that in a meaningful way and then extrapolate that to a society as a whole. And so the role of numbers is really to transform what could be a lot of anecdotes, a lot of just individual stories, into a much larger tapestry about what is happening in society and in the world more generally.
Now, I've seen you present your numbers and your thinking, and you're mesmerizing. You take over an audience. But what advice can you give to marketers who take this data, who have their intuition, so that they're making the right decisions, that they feel confident moving forward?
The first thing is you need to make sure that you're asking the right questions. If you are assuming that people are only rational, and they only think about products in a rational way, you may miss the underlying story, which is that a lot of motivations deal with how people feel about themselves, their families, their hopes, their aspirations, their anxieties. You need to get at those and link those to products. Diving deep, as we call it, is very important. The other thing which is tremendously important is understanding that there's no such thing as an average consumer. I've been doing this for 50 years, and some of the most rewarding work that I've done has involved trying to get at and understand the key segments in any particular marketplace. Because if you can understand the unique personalities and segments, it really is the key to unlock success in marketing.
And do you feel that marketers today rely too much just on the data and don't do enough with that curiosity of really uncovering what makes that individual unique?
Data, when analyzed properly, can bring to life tremendous narratives, stories, understanding. It's not that there's this kind of zero-sum game between rationality and feelings. The core of sociology, the core of really good market research, is to link those two.
So when I look back at your career with your doctorate, the very beginning, it looked like you were going full tilt in an academic career. It seemed like overnight you decided to put that aside and become an entrepreneur. A lot of people watching this that have that itch to become a small business owner, an entrepreneur. What gave you the courage to make that leap? And what did you learn about yourself doing that?
At the time, the academic career was just too slow for me. I was a tenured associate professor. I suppose I could have stayed there for life. I just was too much of a young man in a hurry. I decided at age 30 that I would jump into my own small polling company. And I just found it much more interesting to be dealing with real life problems where the work that I was doing was not just being reported in some obscure academic journal, but was actually having an impact on the careers and lives of a great many other people. So it was really a chance to get involved, if you will, in the muscle and sinew of decision making as opposed to being on the sidelines.
How important is that for people that are looking to become entrepreneurs or building a business or a brand to really connect it all to passion? I mean, this is a word that's been racing through this interview so far. I was passionate about numbers. I was passionate about being at the center of decision making. Do you think that's key to building a business nowadays?
I think that's important, but I think the even bigger issue is you really have to know how to build a great team of people. I know that sounds like a bit of a cliche, but there's a lot of companies that, particularly in the area that I was in, which was basically market consulting, they get to $3 or $4 million and can't get beyond that. And that's because often the founders don't know how to make the leap from themselves being the center of attention to building a larger team of individuals who can really allow you to scale. And in the case of Angus Reid Group, we scaled that over the course of a couple of decades from a cold start to about a $60 million company, which we sold for about $100 million 20 years ago. So that success was in part about vision and passion, but it was also about finding the key to attract and keep really strong talent and help them to grow. And if you can't do that, you're not going to be successful as an entrepreneur.
How difficult is it for you as a leader to let other people have authority and you become more of the elder that now has influence?
You have to do that. If you try to hold on to all of that authority and don't delegate, you will get nowhere. So you really need to allow your colleagues a place in the sun and the spotlight. I was fortunate through a big chunk of my career. I lived in Winnipeg, which people thought was kind of nowheresville, but it really forced me to put other faces out into the world. I mean, at one point, a lot of Canadians didn't believe there was even a person called Angus Reid. They thought that we were a company formed by Mr. Reid and Mr. Angus. And so I would meet people and they said, "We didn't even know you're a person." And I was actually quite happy about that because I wanted our company to be much more than me. And I think in doing that, we were able to achieve a level of greatness.
One of the cornerstones of the American Marketing Association Toronto chapter, by the way, just won a silver award, incredible honor, considering how many chapters compete for it, is mentorship. They really believe in the sense of this exchange of knowledge, almost flowing like liquid between the generations. Did you have a mentor growing up?
I had 2 or 3 of them, particularly early in my academic career. I was able to finish my doctorate at the age of 24, in part because I had a professor who really believed in me. People thought I was too entrepreneurial, even as a graduate student, but having people who are prepared to give you some guidance, but to allow you to make mistakes. I mean, mentorship is not a question of trying to crush someone, but to grow someone. I've mentored a lot of people in my career, and I like to throw them in the deep end of the pool, but at the same time, make sure they've got lots of life rafts around them. So really trying to pull out of people parts of themselves they didn't even know existed.
So you talk about mentorship. Obviously, one of the pieces of advice you'd give a small business owner is the importance of talent. What other advice can you give to somebody that's building a brand or building a business if they were lucky enough to have you as a mentor?
I think authenticity is a very important virtue and value these days, particularly with social media, with just this cacophony of voices and inputs around. Finding a way to present yourself in an authentic way is, I think, tremendously important.
Speaking of mentor and mentorship, I'm going to invite somebody from AMA Toronto, a volunteer, an intern, someone that's starting off their career, to ask you a question.
Thank you, Tony. Hi, my name is Ankit Rajawasti. I am a marketer and an AMA volunteer. I'm also a member of the Career Accelerator program here at AMA Toronto. Angus, my question to you is, what do you know now that you wished you knew when you were 20 years old and just starting your career?
Oh, wow. That is a very big question. I think we've gone through some tremendous surprises. Probably the biggest one is the whole role of digital media and social media and how that has transformed the landscape of anyone in marketing, anyone doing research, broadly our society. Things have overtaken us to such an extent. I was reading recently that almost 50% of the advertising dollars in Canada are now being spent on social media. We are into a tsunami of change. I think that those who have attached their balloon to that have done well, was able to move into the internet early. I wished in retrospect, I'd even moved in a much more dramatic and effective way. But That certainly has been a huge change that has taken me by surprise.
I want you to put on the hat of a small business owner that's dealing with this change, insecurity, uncertainty. But at the same time, small business owners are the heart of the Canadian economy. Big focus for AMA Toronto chapter in terms of really growing that sector. What advice can you give to them in terms of how do they march in step with this change?
Yeah, that's very well put. There's a number of forces that are really driving Canadian society over the next 20 to 30 years. One of the most important is going to be the changing demography of Canada. Also, there's going to be some very big changes with respect to technology, artificial intelligence, other things of that sort, which I think are also going to make a big difference. So I think trying to grab hold of the unfolding dynamic of Canadian society and to place your trust in where we're headed, I think is really going to be one of the keys for success of small and large businesses.
So how did marketers come to terms with it? Earlier on, you talked about there's no such thing as an average consumer. Now we're adding on this incredible tapestry of diversity. But from a marketing point of view, what do marketers need to do to stay abreast of that and to turn that into something that they can feel compelled to do great work for?
I think there's some very big opportunities and also very big challenges. The opportunities rest in this diversity that I mentioned. It rests in the tremendously changing landscape of digital technology, but it also rests in very big changes in values that we see in Canadian society. People talk a lot about climate change, but the truth is that represents a tremendous opportunity for those marketers who can begin to understand that latching on to solutions and to an authentic perspective on climate change is, tremendously important and may be a key to success. I think the challenge is that the environment for connecting with Canadians has never been more complicated. I was able to make my name a bit of a household name because people read newspapers and there was 4 major networks and everyone looked at things through the same lens. Well, now we have literally thousands of lenses. So trying to navigate this very complex perceptual environment that's brought to us by social media is a huge challenge for marketers and a huge opportunity for those who can figure out how to make that work.
Angus, another question, and that comes to ageism. Like I look at you and I go, you have so much to offer in terms of the next generation of marketers. How do we find a way to bridge the gap between generations so that people realize that this exchange of knowledge is something that can work to everybody's advantage?
Part of that is the role of organizations like the AMA, what you're doing with the Marketing Hall of Legends. I mean, I think that we need to find forums in which we can bring these generations together and have people kind of learn from each other. Certainly guys like me who, despite some of the success I've had, I've also had lots of challenges and haven't done everything right. But I think some of the experience I have, finding a way to provide that to younger entrepreneurs, I think is something that, I quite frankly cherish. I don't aspire money anymore, but I do aspire to try to help people who are trying to navigate their way into the future.
My final question is, you talked a lot about what you've done since 2010 when you're inducted. You certainly do not have the DNA to ever stop. What's going to feed your mind and your soul over the next decade?
Along with my son Andrew and daughter Jennifer, we're operating 3 businesses that are collectively now doing about $30 million across North America. So that's keeping me engaged in the enterprise side of things. But I'm also working on a new book with my colleague Shachi Curl over at Angus Reid Institute, which is really trying to look at what Canadian society is going to look like in 2050. How a combination of technology, demography, climate change, and changing values are going to create a very different world for people at home, at work, in their communities, and in the public square. So that's an intellectual passion that allows me to continue to keep my mind engaged.
Angus, I always end my interviews with my key takeaways. And first of all, I'm just enamored by just your approach to the world. Curiosity is what drives your soul, and you'll use any means to really identify unmet needs and how people are feeling and thinking and where the world is moving. And that's something of immense value to all of us. The second is your humility and your generosity. And just as you as a leader talking about, finding the right talent, letting them soar, letting them grow, getting out of their way. And the third thing that I enjoyed the most is when you said, people thought there was an Angus and there was a Reid. And I kind of liked the fact that they didn't know who I was. And putting that ego and leaving that ego at the door and focusing more on the pursuit and the passion and the things that matter to you, versus worrying about whether you matter, I think is an incredible lesson in leadership. And I thank you for joining the Legends Journey.
Thank you, Tony.